Welcome to Digital Talk Podcast, where we spotlight entrepreneurs and innovators leveraging technology related to telecoms to drive positive global impact. I'm here with my co-host Frankie and we'll be talking to Sebastian Stockzelius, who is co-founder of Janah Cycle. In this episode, we want to find out more about Jhana Cycle and how to create a better world related to circular economy.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, a leading business growth consultancy representing promising software providers selling to the telecoms, enterprise and mobile markets in Europe. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
Hi Frankie, how are you today?
Hi, Ian. Doing well. Looking forward to digging into the meat of Sebastian's new enterprise and what they are doing in the circular economy world and with technology. What are you particularly interested in hearing about today, Ian?
Well, I think it'd be useful for people to listen to the previous episode. And the things that are clear to me is that Sebastian really wants to make a difference in the world, and he also wants to join the dots, as I like to call it. So he sees the opportunity of the North Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere of actually working together to actually make some fundamental changes. So that's the sort of things that I'd like to hear more about and how they're going to do that.
I think that is a perfect introduction for me to welcome our guest, Sebastian Stockzelius, who we actually met this year at Mobile World Congress at the famous Swedish beers in Barcelona. So welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you very much. And amazing coincidence that we met at the Swedish beers and everything. It's fantastic. And I should also start by saying that Jhana is much bigger than just me. It's a whole group of people working together for a common cause, not just including the founders and the team members, but also the partners on the ground, all the fantastic individuals with us, as well as, of course, the partners who are supporting this cause. And also something important, I think, to say is when we talk about Jhana, it's if you think back if you have ever played like video games, you used this word mana. So that's a similar pronunciation, mana, Jhana. So, and we don't really use the cycle part. It's just to, connect the dot because we're living in a kind of a circular way, and that's what we want to do.
So I guess lots of our listeners won't have actually heard much about Jhana. So do you want to explain a little more about what it's about and what you guys are trying to do?
Sure thing. Initially, Jhana was created as a response to a problem that me and my co-founder could not solve in our previous jobs, where we worked in the plastic and carbon credit industry. And it was basically just, how do you find the right kind of solution for small and medium-sized enterprises, but also bigger corporates when it comes to plastic and carbon credits? That is a very big term in many ways now when it comes to sustainability, even though carbon credits is much more famous, so to say, or people know a lot more about it. It's been around for a long time. It's also a regulated market.
It's had a lot of press.
Yes, definitely. Some good, some bad. And I think that's what happened. Like, we tried to sell that solution that we worked for in the past. Hundreds of brands we talked to, and they were just not biting. And we asked them, as normal salespeople do, like, why not? What are the three main things that we need to change to get to a solution that you would actually buy into? And hearing those problems, we basically created Jhana as a response to specifically solve that and to basically bring something that is genuine to the market and true impact to the business leaders around the world, really looking to make a change and not just looking to make headlines.
Right, because carbon credits and at least the mirror version term of greenwashing in large corporations go hand in hand. So in what you do now, who is your Goliath? If you're a David, who's really causing the problem that you are looking at?
I don't want to point any fingers, but I think it's important to understand the word greenwashing, because that's actually one of the big problems that all of these brands that we talk to mention.
Yeah.
And greenwashing is obviously something that everybody heard about the word, but not everybody really knows what it means. The thing is that nobody wants to be associated with greenwashing. Everybody knows it's a negative thing. It means basically you're saying something that is not true. You're not forthcoming. And if you have $1 million brand or even $1 billion brand, you're not going to risk the value of your company being associated with that, which is why many companies are very hesitant to buy into the whole carbon credit schemes.
Yeah.
And some of those programs are actually very great and they're working very nice. But when it becomes too big and when too big corporates buy into it, there's a lot of money involved. And usually when a lot of money is involved, someone gets greedy. We've seen some of these stories out in the press about that, and I don't even understand how it can be possible. Some of these schemes, according to the press and the research that has been released, has actually had a negative impact instead of a positive impact.
Yeah.
And I think that's created a huge distrust in the market, and which of course did not make it easier to sell such a solution. And when it comes to the credits themselves, after working there, we've noticed that if you look at what the credit is supposed to do, in many cases, it does not do that. So I think that the genuine idea is good, but how it is operationally functioning and executed, that's the problem. And that's one of the problems why we created Jhana. How can you create a solution which brings genuine impact and also helps the companies that wants to make a difference? They want to make something good, but they're very afraid of doing the wrong move. And it's almost like in the recent years, we've heard another concept called green hushing. So you're doing things, but you're not talking about it because you're afraid someone is going to point the finger and say that you're doing greenwashing. So the brand owners and those that are in charge of the communication are waving in between, should we do more and communicate about it, or should we do more and not say anything at all? Or should we just do nothing, because what point does it really make? And that's a dilemma which is negative for the entire value chain.
It is.
So we need to create a change that can be positive and that has a true impact, which again can be traceable. You need to be able to track what you're doing and account for every dollar spent. And that's a challenge.
And it's a challenge because we have this distrust that's built. We're living in an age of distrust. We're living in an age of misinformation, even though we're in a moment where we have access to more information than we ever have before. It's very important for companies to, A, give benefits for being sustainable, right? That's what these schemes are. It's not a term commonly used in America, but it's a tax benefit or a tax break in some form. And there's other ways that these happen. So tell us, how does it work in practice, what Jhana does? And does it replace current government? Like, tell us how it works actually. And is it different for mid-size, big size, micro enterprise?
The basics of it all, if we look at, for example, plastic credits, is that you're buying into something that will help to recover or prevent that plastic pollution is happening. And the best way of doing that, which is the social aspect, is to connect it with the people who is actually doing the jobs. And similarly, on the carbon credit side, you're planting trees, maybe you're doing something related with mangroves that has a very big potential. And the people involved doing that's where your biggest impact is. And then, of course, how do you measure a gas, for example? I think that's the big challenge with carbon, because it's a gas. Can't really see it, can't really touch it. How do you know it's really there? To the contrast of plastic, nobody can deny that plastic exists. No one can deny the problem.
Right.
You can touch it, you can even eat it. In fact, most of us are consuming plastics.
Right, it's in our water.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I saw an Australian study from 2019 or something like that a grown human being consumes about 1 credit card worth of plastic every single week. And over a lifetime, we eat about, I don't know exactly the numbers, but between 40 to 50 kilos.
Yeah.
And obviously some of that goes out, but some of it also stays inside of our bodies. And it has a bad effect, because we found it now in breast milk for women. We found it in the unborn babies, etc. So it's really a problem that no one can deny. So that's why we with Jhana chose to focus more on plastic rather than carbon, which is, to kind of conceptualize.
And let's just, for those of our listeners who might not know, at its base elements, plastic is a resulted component of what exactly?
In the end of the day, it's a petroleum product. So there is many big corporates that have lots of incentives to carry it forward. And if we see the Global Plastic Treaty, for example, it was recently a big meeting in Canada, I believe. And if you look at the detailed reports, I spoke with a very high-level person. I'm not going to mention where his name or where he comes from, but a very high-level person that has been involved for the last 30, 40 years in environmental fighting, so to say. When you read the reports, it's a lot of lobbyists in these meetings. And countries are trying to do certain things. Activists are trying to do certain things. But there's always, I would like to call them the big guys, the people behind the scenes, the lobbyists who are speaking for the company interests. And it's all about money in the end, of course. It usually is. But that's a little bit of the issue as well. And we're seeing across the board, I would say, in many of these events and conferences that we've been to, that's, what do you call it, organic plastic, like basically bioplastics.
Yes.
Such new inventions are really a big topic. But I've also seen that if, for example, like plankton, you can convert it into this plastic polymer. But if we were to replace all the plastic around the world, we would have to basically grow these seaweed farms all over the oceans, and that's not really a sustainable solution either. So I think there's a lot of innovation and research that still has to be done. Lots of good ideas are already out there. But when it really comes down to it, I think there are simpler ways to be responsible to make sure that the plastic doesn't end up in the environment in the first place. Sure, you have someone producing it, you have someone selling it, and you have someone consuming it. But what happens after that? In some places, for example, here in Sweden, we are actually importing waste from other countries to fuel the heating of our cities, especially in the winter. So in a weird way, I guess you could say we're net positive on garbage.
You guys are net positive on a lot of things.
Yeah, shouldn't believe everything we hear, but yeah, in some ways. But if we look at other countries and locations, for example, India, many of the places that we visited, there is no garbage collection system at all. There is not even a bin. And one example is that the government installed loads of bins, big marketing campaign, and the people bought into it and they started putting their garbage there. And then in the end of the day, nobody came to pick it up. So now the conception amongst the population is it doesn't matter, because even if we put it there, it's not going to happen anything with it. So what do? Typically, historically, it's like we said, it's a petroleum product. You can burn it. You can create energy. In some cases, you can dump it out into the wild and throw it into rivers and the problem goes away. And that's, I think, a simple way of solving the problem, to look at how we dispose of it, meaning the preventing of making sure that it doesn't end up in the environment in the first place. And of course, recovering the plastic and the garbage in general that is already there. And that actually brings us into maybe two of the legs that Jhana is actually standing on.
Nice.
Because we basically have three different pillars of impact.
Okay.
The first one being, of course, the social part. Because when there's a human element involved, it's always 100 times better than when there is not. And if you as a brand are looking to make an impact, you're not going to talk in extensive amounts about how many kilos of dirty plastic you have collected, but you're going to talk about the hundreds of people that you have helped. That's the point. And the second pillar is, of course, what do you do with the plastic that is already there? When we traveled around in the Himalayas, we saw these huge landfills out in the jungle. They just dumped it off the roads, basically. That's the kind of plastic that we have to go there and collect and recover, because no one is going to take that away from the environment. So if we just leave it, it's slowly disintegrating and creating lesser and lesser particles, which then goes into the waterways. The animals eat it. We eat the animals. It's just a bad circle.
Yeah, it's a whole different type of cycle that we don't want to be in, but we are.
Exactly. But unfortunately, we are. So we have to address that issue.
We have to.
And that's another one of the problems with the current plastic and carbon credit markets. It's a financial method. That's what it is. But that financial method is also built in the sense of plastic that you can create value out of the material that you collect, meaning recycling or incineration to replace oil and coal, etc. But if there is, for example, in the case of a landfill out in the jungle where it's overgrown with plants, it's dirty, there's not going to be a recycler who's going to take that in and put it into their machines because they will destroy the machines.
Yeah.
So you have these contaminated materials that you can't really do anything with. So there's no economic value to recover it. And that's where we come in our second pillar, because we basically have created a system where we can go where nobody else can go due to our partners' funding.
Yeah.
We can actually address those locations, regardless if it is in a mountain, on a jungle, on a beach, etc. And of course, many questions are asked from all of our stakeholders. What do you do with that plastic?
Yeah. Do you try to reclaim it?
Yeah, we recover it with our
do.
partners.
Okay.
Yes, of course. That's the point. But then the end of life,
Right.
that's the
next
critical
point.
question.
Right.
Can you recycle it? And in most cases, you cannot. And then you have to explain the fact about there's only one way, and that's incineration.
Yeah.
And luckily, in many developing nations, there is a lot of construction being developed, and you require a lot of energy, cement, etc. So you can burn it in these cement factories and similar places. And that's really the best way of dealing with it, once you have extracted the recyclables, of course. There is obviously exceptions where I know, for example, there's a recycling facility in Finland and a few other places where they have specific machines that can basically take care of all kinds of mixed plastic, and they don't make nice product. It's not really recycling, it's downcycling. In that sense, you can make new things like these pallets for warehouses.
Right, exactly.
Or bricks. There's big stores in Africa, they're making bricks for the houses,
Yes.
etc. So there is use cases, but not enough on a big global scale where it is really needed. So that's second pillar with the
Reclamation.
Recovery. Yeah. And then the third pillar is the preventing it to reaching the environment in the first place, because we cannot just clean up until the end of days. We have to make sure it doesn't go there in the first place. And that's how we install these door-to-door collections, create education, installing bins, etc. And when it is that kind of plastic, basically post-consumer plastic, that has a much higher recyclability, and that's a whole different game. So those are the three pillars that we stand on when it comes to impact: social, tactical, and preventive.
Tactical, that's a great word for it. Tactical. And that preventative is where really the tax credits have failed before, because it makes them pay for doing things, but it doesn't necessarily make them change the output of what they're doing.
That's very good, by the way, your three pillars. I'm just also looking at the LinkedIn, and you also mention, it says here, impact leader with ocean care and women empowerment. Can you talk to the women empowerment?
So it's really simple. In many places in the global south, there is great injustices. A lot of women, a lot of kids do not have the same privileges as men have. They are, in many cases, supposed to be at home, taking care of the family, etc. There's nothing wrong with that, but there should be an equal opportunity. And a lot of the examples that we have seen where women are actually empowered to create micro businesses, create income for themselves, because in many cases, the men basically have the income and they control it. And that puts the woman in a difficult spot. So seeing some of the smiles on the faces of these people when they are taught new skills, when they are taught, for example, how to upcycle textile waste into new products that they can sell on the local markets, they're like harnessing new skills, which allows them to create this financial capacity. Freedom, yeah. And that's one of the key things. And of course, one of the, I would say almost like a surprise that we saw when we were traveling around in India is that the garbage sector, when we're looking at more rural areas, is typically not dominated by men. It is dominated by women, because I guess from different reasons, but I've heard some incredible stories about how some of these women collectives started going out in the villages, knocking on doors, and people were like calling them names. They said, "Oh, you're the garbage people." It was very like difficult to start with the process, But several years in, now it's a very different experience. It's positive, and people are like inviting them for coming in for a cup of tea. It's positive. People understand that you're doing something good
for all of
for
us,
the village,
right?
for the community.
Everyone.
Exactly. So the narrative is changing, but it's slow and it could be sped up a little bit. And that's something that we aim to do, because bringing awareness, bringing education and dignity, I would say, that's something that can make you really change perspectives across all genders and generations, and seeing a bigger interest from the younger generations in terms of how to deal with the waste, for example, is quite inspiring. And like many of our partners have seen and have shown us and told us, is that it's sometimes difficult to influence the parents, that it might be in different kind of ages, but they're used to doing it their way. But when you influence, the kids can come home and say, hey, mom, why are you throwing that over there? You should separate it. We can do like this. And to my surprise, also in India, you won't find a lot of PET, for example. PET is probably the most valuable plastic material that you have, because you can recycle it quite a long way. And you won't find a lot of PET out in the nature in India because it has value. So people take care of the things that have value. And if they are also taught what has value, less things would be left in the environment.
So explain the difference between PET products or PET plastics and other cheaper.
So I think a good example is these kind of flimsy chips wrappers, like candy wrappers, chips packages, these kind of things. And when you're coming from Europe, and you have these big companies, right? The big companies are selling you this Lay's, for example, and you just assume that this package looks and feels pretty much all the same, regardless of where in the world you are. But one thing that we saw in India is that it's nearly impossible to open up a chips bag like we do in the West, like we just, boom, open it, we eat, and the whole thing is intact. But in India, you have to tear it apart, creating this little small piece that what do you do when you don't have a bin? It usually just, woof, throw it out in the nature. And then you have this small little piece there, and then you have this big bag, but it's not anymore connected. So the recyclability process is now very different. And of course, there's many examples, but another thing in India is that because it's less purchasing power, everything comes in much smaller packages. For example, you can buy like a shampoo, like you don't buy a shampoo bottle like we do. You buy a small little one-time use shampoo, and that creates obviously millions, probably billions of more packages.
This is the part of this kind of cost versus quality equation that always baffles my mind. Because how can it be that wrapping a smaller amount of shampoo completely in any form of plastic over at a small quantity at scale is cheaper? I would have to look into the economics of it more, but perhaps you already have my answer, Sebastian.
I don't know if I have the answer, but I think it all goes back to economics. And we talked a little bit about the big corporates before who are producing the plastic in the first place.
Yeah.
And if you control the supply chain, and if you have the incentive to sell your product, it doesn't have to be that expensive to create the packaging, but then you should also be responsible for the consequences of creating that packaging.
Yep.
And I think there is a little bit of a disconnect there, especially in the global south, where the collection system just is not what we are used to, maybe.
And how far have you now got with the Jhana project? You mentioned mountains, you mentioned the sea, you mentioned several sort of places where you see this being used, but how far is the project?
I think also connecting a little bit back to what you said before about the ocean and everything. And in the end of the day, all waters goes down. It goes with gravity towards the ocean. So if you have polluted waters, especially in places like, for example, India, where you have big monsoons, big gushes of water rapidly taking everything with
away.
It to the sea,
Yeah.
then it ends up in the sea. And it's very expensive to clean the sea. We have a few good companies and organizations out there doing it. But we can't all be in the sea. We have to somehow prevent it from going there in the first place. And that's a little bit the philosophy about including the ocean care situation. And as far as how far we have come now, I think what we were very lucky about in the start is that we had the background and the industry knowledge already. I personally sourced, I think, 10, 15, 20 different project locations around the global south throughout my times. And when we decided to start Jhana, we didn't want to go big or anything like that. We wanted to go small and genuine. And that's why we've had the same partners basically since we started. And we all met them face to face in India. It was not just some kind of a business transaction happening virtually. It's about the feeling and the connection that you get when you actually meet people to see if they are truly genuine, to know if it's about the money or if it's about the actual impact that you can have on people. And in our case, we're lucky to have found such partners already early on when we went to India. And now, in the last year, we have developed on those relationships. We've brought our first clients, our first funding to these partners. We actually just recently finished development of our product, which basically consists of a dashboard with a lot of cool metrics that the clients can track and see in real time as things are happening. And of course, a mobile application that can record the actions on the ground as they are happening. So that's another part of what we are bringing to the table. It's real time and it's traceable. Because what the big brands and the small and medium-sized brands told us before is not just about the fear of greenwashing, but also, is it traceable? Can we see what is happening? And another problem with the credits is that something is happening, and then there is a certificate being generated, and then that certificate is being put out on a market to be sold. But once it is bought by someone, it can be 2 months, can be 6 months, it can be 2 years later from when the action actually happened, meaning that you as a brand owner who bought that credit, you have absolutely no impact whatsoever.
Yeah.
Sure, the money technically should go to something good to create kind of a circle there. But how do you know that? Yeah. And how do you know that the same people that was there 2 years ago are still there? Yeah. And if you trace the money where it's going, how do you know it's not turning into some new fancy car for some rich person?
And across the world, we've seen this in charitable organizations, even as fundamentally unethical or halfway ethical, massive salaries, right? So when these things have that kind of time between the tactical, as your pillar says, transaction, and then this financial benefit to the customer or to the client, you can't really have transparency. And so I love this, the two-sided aspect of it. The mobile app, so you're capturing what's happening. Here's your impact. And the company's dashboard or whomever is the end user, so they can really see. And that has teeth for a PR agent, any sort of strong brand VP or whatever to be able to really take and run with. And we are seeing in reports that those companies who can position themselves as a trusted, sustainable entity, there are really successful models of this working for companies in which it has a positive impact on their ROIs. I feel like that kind of immediate, tangible nature of what you're doing is going to be extremely effective.
Yeah, exactly. And to build on that a little bit, if we look at a lot of companies being created now in the recent years, there is not a lot of new small companies being created without a purpose. You need a purpose to exist, because companies can buy because they want to feel good maybe about themselves, but we're not going to change the world because there's not enough people that wants to do good because they feel good about it. But we can make it if we create a real business solution for companies with a purpose. And that comes into purpose-driven marketing. We actually released an article on LinkedIn about this recently. And in the end of the day, if you solve those issues, if you remove the greenwashing, if you build the trust, and when I say trust, I'm not saying trust me. No, I say go and look for yourself. You can see it for yourself.
Right, trust the impact.
And of course, yeah, of course. And then the traceability of what's happening with your funds. If you have those assurances as a brand, then you can actually start communicating about it, knowing that it is real. And that's when purpose-driven marketing comes into place. There's a lot of studies being shown that companies with a purpose, their customers are much more likely to buy, they're much more likely to trust, and to defend you in case you are accused of something. And that's what everybody wants, because it's a very competitive landscape, especially online. A lot of e-commerce, they are fighting for the attention of the customer.
Yep.
And the attention of the customer is not just about buying anymore. They want to be connected with brands who have a purpose. I think EcoAlf in Spain is a great example of that, even Patagonia. And that's really what it comes down to. And that's the business value that we add with our solution, because it is traceable, it is in real time, and it basically eliminates greenwashing, because what we do is that we collect the funds upfront and then customize the program for the client so that everything is additional above the baseline scenario, which is actually how a credit is supposed to work. If you actually read the framework of how a credit should work, that's how it is. But from what we've seen, most credits do not work like that.
And so I think you've articulated really well the value you can bring, as I say, I don't know if it's the right term, sponsors, would you call them? Is that what you call them?
I would call them impact partners.
Very good, impact partners. And how do you go about reaching out to them? Because, of course, it's a two-sided model, right? There's the one side you need to have the impact partners, but you also then need people on the ground. But just thinking, using us as a voice and a platform, it's a good opportunity for you to do a shout out for them, if you like, and try and get new ones on board.
You have to take every opportunity you can, right? We're in a very early stage process, to be honest. And we're not pretending that we're going to change the world by ourselves. Absolutely not. Plastic pollution and many other problems that we're facing as a humanity, I would say, is a shared global challenge.
Absolutely.
And there is no one escaping it. I spoke with a company up in southeastern part of Sweden recently, and there was some activists there going along the shores. And you would think, Sweden, that should be pretty clean. Shouldn't be that much of an issue. But there is like meters high of garbage that is integrated into the beaches. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the problem will come around and bite you. So everybody needs to do something. Not anyone can do everything, but everyone can do something.
That's nice.
And that's really what it comes down to. And if you are a brand, you want to do a difference, at least in most cases. And of course, you have doubts. You have your concerns about your brand value. But if you can solve those concerns, and if you can prove that it actually benefits your bottom line, then it's a no-brainer. So why not do it, right?
And I think that's what's really interesting about the proposition that you have put together with Jhana, because tax credits are one thing. The carbon credits, like you said, initial efforts got all wrapped up in the seaweed farms of greenwashing, right? I think what you are doing, it's like attacks the core of the problem if you don't necessarily have sustainability in your business model, which a lot of companies aren't going to, right? Software companies, how can I be sustainable? Really? What are you producing? Okay, you're consuming energy. What can I do to offset my energy consumption? Where do you go to be able to contribute? And how do you act as a good corporate citizen? And I think that there's the Carbon Institute, which has done some interesting stuff. And I think there have been a lot of efforts, like you said. But what you guys are doing really attacks the heart of the UN sustainability goals. Yeah. You guys are covering how many of those goals with the tactical on-the-ground execution of what your impact partners are getting?
That's actually very interesting, because the more you delve into those goals, the more difficult it is to actually decipher all the metrics, all the KPIs that exists. In a broad perspective, we're pretty much tackling all of them. There's exceptions, of course, but most importantly, I would say it's the people, but also life on land and life in water and so on. But the development goals themselves was actually something we originally was very focused on, because as a young business today, you need to have that focus. But now when time has progressed, we've become more mature and so on. Now it just feels like it's an obvious part of the whole thing. And we're not talking so much about it anymore. It just has to be there.
Yeah.
And I think for obvious reasons. But I think it's important to mention one more thing about the consumerism that you mentioned. We've seen large companies like Dell, big computer companies, they have big desires of actually using recycled plastic for their laptops, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have these big companies starting to buy into the concept that we need to buy recycled materials, then the big question comes up, where the hell do we get those materials? Because it needs to be the top quality materials. And of course, it needs to be material that has some kind of a story. Because, for example, you can work with a big recycler in Mumbai, which millions of people, lots of tonnage coming in every day, but it's just garbage trucks going from apartments, etc. The story is not there. But if you would, for example, work with Jhana and similar companies, and you would have some kind of a history, some kind of an impactful story connected with that material, then you're not just buying a laptop. You're buying a purpose.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of companies wants to buy into. And I invite all of them to come and join us in that conversation. I know they are interested in it. We've already heard some of them speak a lot about it, some of them directly to us. And it's something that would definitely change the game if we have a little bit bigger corporates coming in. And it would definitely create a bigger and more interesting conversation to be had. But I think it's also important to mention that like a lot of companies don't have anything to do with plastic. And it's not really about the plastic.
Right.
You can do textile, for example. We have a huge pollution of textile around the world that barely anyone is talking about. And a lot of our focus recently has actually been fashion companies. And that seems to be a very big success because obviously lots of textile is actually plastic. And not a lot of people know that.
Polyester, rayon.
Yeah.
These are all plastics. In fact, that cycle is a down cycle process of a higher plastic product. And the fashion industry can be some of the worst at downgrading a recyclable material into a non-recyclable material. So something like a plastic water bottle into polyester, which then cannot be recycled and degrades at a much slower rate. And they put it into the fast fashion cycle. And if you haven't looked at the From the Sky satellite videos of our fast fashion trash heaps on the planet, people, you really should be conscious about your dollars because it's really bad.
Yeah, and I think fast fashion is a huge industry. A lot of money, a lot of taxes coming on that. So I can understand why it exists. But I think we also have a responsibility, especially the younger generations who are the main buyers of that fast fashion.
Yeah.
Mainly it's cheap, it's trendy, but the trends are changing so fast. Like I know there's this company that has a new trend like every week.
Yeah.
That should be impossible. It's like going on a conveyor belt to the entire trends. And people should ask themselves, is it really necessary? Like in the last years, I don't buy any clothing unless I really need it. And I think the last purchase I did was a couple of shoes from Equalf. When you buy something that you really need, something that is quality and from a brand with a purpose, you feel connected with that piece of clothing and you're proud of it. And imagine the commercial for that brand to be spoken about in such a positive way, like I speak about my shoes. So there is some consideration to be done that can influence the decisions and the pollution that we're facing. And it's definitely linked with consumer behavior.
It really is.
So we are the purchasers, so we have the power.
We do have the power. It's the same thing. It's been a decade now. And it's funny when I'm not in the US, because I think the US has this idea of thrifting a little bit more than some other countries, whereas in like the UK calls it a charity shop. Like I haven't bought a new piece of clothing in 15 years because you don't need to. It's just there and cheap and quality. And so it's really about individual behaviors, but also these companies having options who, like yourselves, like Jhana and what you're doing, when they don't necessarily have a direct attachment to the recycle line themselves.
I wanted to ask you, talked about impact partners, because I was thinking from a shout out or let's say visibility people of podcasts, there's one side, those people, let's say the brands, which is obviously a strong point that you both have been talking about. But I imagine you also have, what are you going to call them? The people that actually on the ground doing the work type of thing, helping you. It's also an opportunity to also recruit them. What have you got to say to them and why they should be working with you?
So we call them our partners on the ground, and they are really amazing people and amazing individuals that have something really genuine at heart. And to many people's surprise, like also when we speak to investors, they're all very concerned about what's the operational capacity. And I usually say there's not any shortage of people that wants to receive money for doing something good. So it's never going to be any problem on the operational side. The only challenge that will ever be is having enough brand partners that can create that impact and make sure that we get the money to the right places. I think that's really what it is about. And I've noticed in past companies as well, if you chase too much of the operational capacity, but you don't have the clients, that collaboration is never going to work because they're going to sit there and wonder, when am I getting my money? Am I getting anything here? And if they get $20 or $100 a month, that's ridiculous. They can't do anything with that. So it's about making sure that you have a balance between your operational capacity and how much support you have from brands around the world. And right now, the operational capacity is very high, and we need to focus a lot on the impact partners.
Now, are you guys doing any clever with that money distribution to your partners on the ground in like a mobile money kind of global remittance sort of strategy behind what you're doing so that can be very real time and get to their phones and be part of their practical lives in an immediate way?
So I think the biggest difference that we brought to the table, if we compare it to other solutions, is that we have a prefixed model that basically determines how much in terms of percentage of the funding that should go to social impact, how much that should go to tactical cleanups, and how much that goes to preventive collections. That way we can create a little bit of the narrative in terms of what we're doing and make sure that we're not getting stuck in some place where the normal plastic credits are, where it's just focusing on preventive collections, door-to-door collections, because the plastic is cleaner, it's more profitable. For us, that's not the key focus. We want to be able to focus on the social part and the tactical part, because that's the part that not other people are doing. That's our special sauce. Imagine if you are, say, a mountain, like a mountain climbing brand, for example. Mm-hmm. Imagine having your impact on the mountains of Himalayas,
yes.
Which is possible, actually. We have a specific collection point there that can be activated. And it's pretty cool because there is a couple of guys, they are very strong,
trekkers,
hard-minded,
right.
And they trek up the mountain and they get it. And they trek down, and there is no roads, there is no cars. This is manual labor, 100%. And you can imagine the kind of content and the kind of story that you can build from that as a brand. The same thing if you are focused on the ocean, you have beaches, mangroves, etc. There is something for anyone to be had.
And think about how cool that is as a brand. You've got these two hardened trekkers trekking up the mountain. This is your direct impact on the planet. They have their mobile app. They're going to be capturing content, sharing their progress, showing what they've done, probably reporting in, I imagine, some sort of weight around what's been collected weekly or whatever the case may be. This is really tangible 21st century marketing content. I mean, it's fantastic. I would love that. If I were the marketing director sitting in that office, it's gold. That's gold. And it does translate directly to the bottom line. It really does, because consumers really are done with the greed and the distrust and the saying something's good and it's not, and not thinking about your impact. We're just done with it. But I was going to ask you specifically to the telco operators, are you doing any work with a telco operator currently? Is there anything unique about what that would look like for the big telco operators to become impact partners with you?
I think it goes a little bit back to the conversation about plastic and textile. It doesn't have to be about what kind of material are you focusing on. the impact is there and ready available for anyone to be a part of. And all they need to do is decide to take that first step. Don't be afraid to be a first mover. And it doesn't really matter if you're selling a service or if you're selling a product, anyone can be involved, and we should be. For example, I know that a conversation that was interesting with a specific telco provider in the past was about the SIM cards. They're made of plastic. And the conversation was basically about, okay, let's measure how much weight this card has and how many cards we have to sell and what we can do to compensate for that or to recover the same amount. That's just one example, but it doesn't really have to stop at any place but your own imagination.
Right.
But if I understood it correctly, you've got experience, which they can come to you and say, we want to do this, right? We don't know how, but we want to do it. We want to be part of the Jhana story and capability impact. You can help them develop those stories and provide the content.
Yeah, of course. That's a big part of what we're doing at this early stage as well, since we sit on the knowledge. We have direct contacts with so many people. It's all about creating the narrative that fits for all the parties. And of course, make sure to protect the client so that they don't make any audacious claims about something that is not true and something that cannot be proven. And we usually toggle back and forth. We present some ideas. We let them circulate around internally. And usually they come back with even better ideas that we then have to check and see if this actually is something.
Co-creation, correct.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the end of the day, we don't want to create something just like that. It's not a boxed up solution that fits for everyone. It has to be something that is truly genuine and adaptable for your brand.
Right.
And that's, I think, the beauty of it.
Because really to have an impact at this point and to do what needs to be done to ensure that our planet continues to survive so that we don't all have to get on Elon Musk's spaceship and come join me in Mars, right? We have to do it. We have to do it now, and we have to continue to do it more and more of us. So if you haven't thought about how your company can have an impact on this planet, how your company aligns with the UN sustainability goals, what you're going to do to tap into the conscious consumer dollar, then you should absolutely check out Jhana Cycle. They got initiatives all over the world. And like Sebastian said, they can help customize something to you. So you're a big telco operator out there right now, contributing to the 5 billion SIM cards that are shipped annually. That's a lot, right? This is a big problem. And that's just the SIM cards, not the energy that gets produced or anything else. Were there any of those ocean cleanup companies? You said that there were some that were really doing good that you felt were high. Would you want to give them a shout out before we sign off here? Somebody who, that you're currently working with?
Not that I'm working with anyone, but ever since I was not that young. But when the ocean cleanup started, I remember following that journey of that young entrepreneur. He had a vision. It was a very difficult vision to actually execute on, and he needed a lot of support. But I think because of his drive and passion, he actually succeeded. And people can say different things about what they are doing and what impact it actually has. But when you see those big boats going with those huge nets and just grabbing all of that plastic in the ocean, I must believe that it is making some kind of a difference. And if not anything, it is bringing awareness to the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a very important part.
Yeah.
And then I've seen stories how they actually recycle some of this material. And if you're a brand, again, buying that kind of plastic, recycling it and putting it into your products, another great example of a good story to tell.
Mm-hmm. Doing it at the beginning. Don't just use the cheapest, make something better. Make sure you know how it can be reclaimed or recycled or whatever. Yeah, I love those stories too. Like even the Greta Thunberg moment. It was like when she rode on the ship to the UN thing that she was speaking on. Now, we're not all going to get on ships for our air travel, but the awareness and the point and the, like you said, the young person looking at us on this planet going, you are responsible for this. You have to do something about this now. And you guys are a way for companies, large, small, to do something about this now, actively, tactively, and effectively.
So thank you very much, Sebastian, for the discussion and sharing how the world can be a bit better, and particularly if everyone's prepared to do a little bit, we'll most likely get there quicker. There's no magic wand, I'd also say, but it's actually connecting. And I think what I understood was the ability to connect immediately the people who want to make impact, and seeing that actually delivered in reality is what it's about. And as you say, cutting out the greenwashing. It's a laudable effort, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Frankie, and thank you very much, Ian, for having me on.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to our new podcast. If you have any feedback or know of any stories to be told involving digital technology and telecoms doing good, then please do let us know via our email, getinTouch@digiteltalk.com. Also, feel free to send us a message on LinkedIn. It'd be great to hear from you. We are excited to share that we are partnering with Network X, one of the leading telecoms events in Europe, the crossroads of digital, fixed and mobile communications, taking place in Paris between the 8th and 10th of October. Digital Talk will be there to interview some of the most promising contributors to sustainability and tech for good. Don't miss out and book your pass to be inspired, connect and network. Hope to see you there.
Before we go, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to support the podcast, then don't forget to give us a follow and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to leave us a review or share it with your colleagues, it really helps us on the channel. Thanks so much for being a part of our audience today, and hopefully you'll join us next time.
That's all we've got time for, so it's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye from him.
Bye
for now.